All right. Well, hi folks. We have 8 people on so far. Hey, Will. Will has come on live here before to talk about earning a living as well. He is a immigrant in process, and thank you for joining us today. Um, we can go ahead and get started with introductions. Oh, but first, let me just ask those in the chat. So we're all beholden to the algorithm these days, aren't we? And it's something that I resent and I can't stand. But nevertheless, in order to reach people, we have to kind of try to play it to the degree that we can. So I would ask that those who are in the chat tap that heart. Somebody's doing it right now. Thank you very much. Tap that heart, because apparently the heart makes the live show up in people's feeds. I don't know. I'm not a tech person. I'm not an AI person. I'm not an algorithm person. I don't know anything about those things, but I'm told that hitting the heart helps it get reached. So if you would do that, we greatly appreciate it. So we're here today on The Conscientious Immigrant. I'm Elizabeth Sillick LaRue. I support people in moving abroad, and particularly most of my clients are people that come from more marginalized backgrounds and are leaving the United States because of the regime. I would say, yeah, probably 100% of the people that I've spoken to and consulted with are leaving because of the political situation in the United States. I don't have anybody that comes to me just because they want to go live in wherever. They go to the people that are really popular and will sell them alive. So and our ethic, conscientious immigration, is all about kind of when moving from the US, being intentional about economic, environmental, and cultural impacts abroad, understanding that the United States has this positionality of imperialism historically, that we, our dollar is really strong. Well, it was our passport privilege, our Anglophone, I guess they call it, English speaking privilege. All of these things play into what we carry with us when we move. And so our goal at Conscientious Immigration is, number one, to only work with people that are aware of that and care about their impacts, because I'm not really interested in helping people move to other places and import U.S. problems into other places. And number two, to help people, navigate this situation, because even the most aware of us, including myself, including my husband, including everybody I know, sometimes we can carry assumptions and expectations that don't necessarily amount to conscientious behavior. So, coaching people through that as well. But really, these days, I am just helping people get their visas and get out. So, Chris, say your name for me in full, please, because I don't think I've ever said your full name out loud.
Yeah, and I think when we met, I had a different name. My maiden name was Sequera, but
Okay.
when my wife and I married, we chose to merge our family names. So
Oh,
my
that's
name is
so
Chris.
cool. I didn't know
Thank you.
that.
Yeah. So we chose to merge our names, and her name is a whole other story in terms of its pronunciation and its spelling, because her original name has a character that's not available in the English alphabet. So we can get
Mhm.
to that perhaps, but just to answer your question, my name is Chris Musay Sequera, and
You
I'm happy
say.
to be here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks so much for joining us. And we've spoken, numerous times and chatted many times over the years about sort of the sustainability industry, the state of DEI, all this other work that we were doing for years before the upheaval. And I just find it so, I mean, you're a recent immigrant to Romania, and you have this long, illustrious career in aviation and sustainability that you have sort of leveraged and I'm assuming utilized the skills from that career to create this new business that's all about supporting decolonial livelihoods. So that's just like so perfectly aligned with what we are doing and, our values and all of that. So, yeah, let's get into it. I guess the first thing I'll ask about is your immigration. Like when did you just moved not long ago, right?
Yeah, not long ago. And I'm happy to get into that. But before I do, I just want to
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity to be here. You did reach out to me and invited me to have this live stream with you. And I truly thank you for that. I thank everybody who's joining, who has already joined us for this live stream. I hope that you'll get a lot of information, value out of this conversation, or at the very least, you'll get a picture of what one person's unique experience is to emigrate, because I would say within the values that you've articulated, yes, I would not call myself an expat. I would call
Mhm.
myself an immigrant. I'm going through an immigration process. Now, we can talk about how words mean things, but I think the connotation is important. We're not talking about how something might be defined in a dictionary. We're talking about the mindset that we have that
Mhm.
motivates us to go from one place to another. So for me, the mindset is really the distinction between, if you will, an expat and an immigrant, an emigrant.
Mhm.
So to answer your question directly, we came here in October of last year.
Mhm. Okay.
And I'm happy to elaborate on any aspect of that that you may wish to, but I think maybe for the audience, I'll just start by saying our choice to be here is in part due to many factors. Now, I think the obvious question might be, why would somebody come to Romania? Somebody like me.
Right.
And we can get into the nuances of that. But I think just as an overview, I will say the following. My wife was born in Romania. She was born in the north of the country.
Mhm.
She was raised here. So she witnessed the fall of communism in 1989, all the
Mm.
repercussions of that. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, she and her family moved from the north of the country down to the south. We are
Mhm.
in a town, I would call it a port city. It is a functioning port city called
Mhm.
Constanța, which is about an
Mm.
hour from the Bulgarian border, and it is on the coast of the Black Sea. And the reason why
Okay.
we came here is because she's very familiar with the area. Before she went to the United States, she was a practicing journalist here in Constanța,
Oh.
and she spent a number of years as a journalist. She was doing political journalism, and there are certain repercussions of that that I don't need
Yeah,
to
I
get
would
into
imagine.
here that actually facilitated her emigration to the United States of America in the mid 2000s, where she
Okay.
settled in New York City. And the only place she's lived in the States is New York City. She and I met around 2017. And long story short, we came to Romania specifically back to this town in last fall because her parents are still here. They're
Mhm.
just a town, two towns to the south of us. So,
Mhm.
yes, the city has changed. Yes, Romania has changed, but there are certain common elements, at least for
Mhm.
her, certain things that are very familiar, even down to specific places that she remembers as she was
Mhm. Mhm.
growing up as a child, being an adult, being a practicing journalist, that that are still there, are still present. And of course, her parents have been here for quite some time now. So
Mhm.
that covers a little bit of the timeline, tiny little bit of the rationale, which we can certainly dive into. And yeah, also starts to answer the question, why Romania? Because
Yeah.
in a certain way, she's coming back home. Now, we can
Right.
talk about the meaning of the word home and the imagery and thoughts that come up to it. Romania is very different from when she left, but also there's definitely a through line, at least in the way that she shares her experience with me,
Mm.
being the
Mhm.
outsider. I can see
Yeah.
through her eyes that there's definitely a through line between the Romania of the mid 2000s, where she was one of many people who left the country to go to places like Spain and Germany and the UK and Canada and the USA.
Right.
And now there's a certain wave of Romanians who are coming back to the country, people in our age range who want to come back and make Romania into the future Romania, whatever that might be. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for the question. I elaborated
Yeah,
there a little bit.
that is really interesting. I don't know a lot about Romania's history, so if if well, I'm curious. So what I'm hearing is that there was maybe some political persecution involved in early 2000s Romania, and people were leaving because of that. Is that safe to say, or?
So the Romania, and I'm not going to pretend to be a deeply embedded in the history. Certainly, my wife could tell this much better than I could because she lived through it. But
Mm,
Romania, fun fact, well, maybe it's not a fun fact. Romania was one of the very, very few countries to overthrow its communist government in a
mm,
violent revolution, which
oh,
included the execution of Ceausescu and his wife on national TV.
oh,
Which, if you want to see that kind of stuff, it's on YouTube. I don't
no
need to
thanks.
talk about it. But that period of upheaval and the culmination of that kind of upheaval in that kind of very specific moment, I think encapsulated where the country was at that time. And this was not necessarily separate from everything that was happening with the Soviet Union and so on and so forth. There are strong
Mm,
relationships between all of those. But I think the unique moment that Romania had um, echoed off into the current day in a certain way. Because many people who were part of that government, the communist government,
mhm,
they had inside information. They had inside positions of power, such that even when democracy came, maybe in name,
mhm,
many of the old structures and people and relationships were still in place, just with
right.
different names, different functions. There's a great documentary. I don't remember the name of it. It's also on YouTube, produced by a Romanian um, news producer that talks
Mhm,
about. I think it's literally called something like 30 years since the fall of communism in Romania,
mm,
and it talks
mhm,
about how people who were deeply embedded in the government were able to build business relationships abroad because they had information about who was doing the shipping, who was
I
doing
see.
supply chain. So they had that
Mhm,
inner expertise and were able to perpetuate their power, even though
mhm,
maybe notionally there was a democracy. So that type of, you could call it corruption, you could call it this or call it that, but that
mhm,
type of government had consequences for the rest of the Romanian people. And I would
yeah,
say, unfortunately, particularly for folks the generation older than us and my wife's parents,
mhm,
there is a deep skepticism, a distrust,
mm,
a government, a cynicism. Um, and part of that is because during the 90s and the mid 2000s, things were falling apart. Right?
mhm,
People, they couldn't get food, they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get housing. Um, And so people started leaving. They started leaving to other parts of Europe, North America, so on and so forth. And so that impact, the impact of the fall of communism in that specific Romanian way still
mhm,
resonates through the present day.
right,
Um,
right, right.
yeah, I could talk a lot about that. But you use the word persecution. I'm not sure I might use that word. Maybe other people more expert than me, more deeply embedded in the history than I am, might use that. But
Mhm,
I would say broadly, people were shut out of opportunities.
mm,
Right?
mhm,
People,
mhm.
in the most literal sense, some people just they couldn't get food. They couldn't feed
Yeah,
themselves. They couldn't feed their families.
right,
Right.
right.
So the
Which is the story of a lot of migration to the United States, in fact, right? I mean,
yeah
throughout the years, all the way back to the potato famine in Ireland, to people leaving Latin America because of the same reasons now. So,
yeah
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I have found, and especially in these last couple of years that I've been doing this work with immigration, I've found that the average American, the average United States citizen doesn't necessarily have a concept of how common immigration is, right? Like, I feel like I was fortunate to grow up in the New York City area where I was around so many people that were, first generation or immigrated when they were little. My friends when I was growing up, like spoke Spanish, right? Their parents, like their parents didn't speak English. I knew a lot of people that had immigrated, so it wasn't as foreign of a concept to me to like uproot your life and even sometimes leave family members behind. Just case in point, I mean, my daughter's grandmother on the other side had moved to the United States from Jamaica about 10 years before she actually brought her son, who was my daughter's father, to the United States. And, I mean, that was by necessity, by choice. It was a little bit of both, right? And it's really interesting because when I talk to people in the United States and I say, they tell me I would love to leave, but I can't. And I'm like, well, why can't you? And often they'll say, well, my aunt relies on me for this, this person, my community, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yo, like people leave their countries and leave their entire families behind every single day. Every single day around the world, right? And I think that it's something that I'm not to say that it's a decision that's made lightly, right? It's not. And oftentimes it's really a necessity, right? There's like you can't get food, you can't get medicine, you got to go make money someplace else and send it home, and that's what it is. But in some cases, it's just, this life is not so great and I'd like it to be better. And I hear it can be better over here. And it it's kind of mind-blowing to me how much resistance, you get from people in the United States. Obviously not my clients. They're coming to me because they want to leave, right? But other people will say, I'd love to, but I can't because this and that. And I'm like, that's not a can't. That's a you're choosing not to because you're valuing these things more than whatever it is that you might be seeking abroad. But anyway, not to get too off topic, I do want to ask you before we dig into your business, because I really want you to talk about that because I think that a lot of people who want to leave the United States, economics is part of it, and their disillusionment with the the job market and the way that we have to earn and the cost of living and the trap that is the United States. I think a lot of people are interested in hearing about how to get out of that. But I do want to ask you, what were your, like, if you had to say three top reasons why you and Maria left the United States and moved to Romania, what were they? What were they?
Yeah,
Not speaking about specifically Romania, just
sure.
the fact that you wanted to leave the United States.
Yeah. Um, I'll be very plain about this without getting too much into our family business. Cost of living, so affordability, um,
Mhm.
safety, um, and I think the third would be family. I think it would be
Mm.
family.
Like,
Those three.
being with Maria's family, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Being with
Mhm,
excuse me, being with Maria's family specifically, and
mhm.
I'd be happy to elaborate in certain directions on any of those. But yeah, for
Would you
me, my
elaborate a
specific
little bit
situation.
on the safety piece? Because I think
Yeah,
that that's what's driving a lot of people these days.
sure. I will say for us, and I just listened three. Sorry, I just listed three reasons. Safety
Mhm,
being one of those. I
mm,
wouldn't say it was the major driver for our specific situation,
mhm,
but I would say instead my experience. And I want to be a little bit careful here because I came here from New York City. We were living in New York City,
mhm,
and we lived in a number of neighborhoods. She and I both.
mhm,
The last neighborhood we lived in New York City was a Spanish speaking neighborhood in northern Queens.
mhm,
There were plenty of people on the streets, mostly my color or a little bit lighter.
mhm,
So I didn't necessarily feel out of place. I will
mhm.
say my Spanish has never been great, so I did feel out of place because I couldn't communicate with people very easily because it was
Yeah.
truly a Spanish speaking neighborhood. Most people were immigrants from South America, for instance, in that particular neighborhood. Um, I was walking home one day, and La Migra is at the building next door. There were 6 or 7
Mhm.
ICE agents, or I guess maybe they were CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, Border Protection, whatever it means.
This is
Um,
last, right?
yeah, this is last year. Yeah.
Mhm,
I was taking a walk and walking back home to our building, and there were about 6 or 7 agents there. And I honestly can't remember, to be honest, I can't remember if I walked on the same sidewalk where they were or if I crossed the street and walked. And I
Mm-hmm.
went back to my building. And as I went into the foyer area of our building, I had the sudden thought, what if they come this way?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have my passport on me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a US citizen. I never thought to carry my own passport around. I have my driver's license, which I always carry around with me. Um, so I had this grand idea to hide around the corner and take my camera and stick it out and like film them to see if they came up. And then I thought to myself, this isn't very wise. Maybe I should just go to my apartment and lock the door, which is what I ended up doing. But
Right.
let's talk about safety. I think what I'm trying to communicate, speaking from my specific experience as somebody who was born in the United States, a citizen from birth, somebody who's a fluent English speaker, right? Somebody
Mm-hmm.
who looks a certain color, but presents as a cisgender man. And we can talk about all the different kinds of privileges that we have and how they express themselves in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was something that I'd written a newsletter a couple of weeks ago, and I had titled it Quiet Paranoia. The
You titled it
sentiment
what?
of, I'd written a newsletter a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago. It's actually based on a video that I posted back when I was on TikTok. I'd made a TikTok video and I'd entitled it Quiet Paranoia. For me, meaning the question of how worried should I actually be about this? Am I
Mm-hmm.
overreacting mentally? Am I making things bigger than they need to be? I see that these things are happening. They're actually happening. I see people's actual experiences being documented in video, in audio, in writing. Obviously, these experiences are real. Could that be my experience? I'm not sure. What information do I have to grasp on this? I see that they're locking up US citizens. Is that a niche thing? Could it happen to me? Is it
Mm-hmm.
about my color? Is it about where I am in terms of whether I walk down the street and cross the path of the wrong vehicle? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So that kind of safety, the psychological aspect of feeling safe
Mm-hmm.
because we're able to release certain kinds of concerns. I would say
Mm-hmm.
that is something that is different for me being in Romania versus the USA, even though, and we can get into this, I'm sure, even though it's obvious to everybody around me that I'm not from around these parts because I don't
Right.
have the same skin color as them.
Right. But you still
So,
don't
yeah.
have that. I mean, that particular, oh God, what do we call it? I mean, this particular blade hanging over your head, right? And I'm so glad that you mentioned the psychological safety, the sense of safety, because for us, well, and that's really, it's so frustrating because you don't know if you're truly unsafe or if these things are going to happen until it's too late, right? You don't, I mean, it's like you can have these, and people are always gaslighting, and primarily white men, right? Will gaslight you and tell you that, you are overreacting, you're being hyperbolic, you're paranoid. My husband wrote an article not long ago about a situation we had, and you would be, I mean, the number of trolls in his comments telling him he needs mental health services, telling him they hope he gets help, blah blah blah. Like all of that gaslighting will make you think that you're overreacting, and then if you tell yourself you're overreacting and you stop taking precautions, then you're actually opening yourself up to the very risk that you knew all along, that your intuition was telling you existed, So, and having to grapple with that all the time, having to decide, all right, am I going to go to this event or to the park or to whatever and take that risk? Or is it better just to stay home? That's not a really good quality of life. you know, it's not a good quality of life. And what I try to tell some of my clients that come to me for an initial consult, a lot of people just want to know, like, what are my options if I do have to leave? If things get so bad, and I'm like, they're already so bad. But, everybody has to make their own decision and determine their own red line. But then when they ask me, Sort of, what do you think about how safe is it really? Is this really going to happen? And you know, I've found myself telling people it's enough that you feel this way. That's enough of a reason, like understanding that you are in a situation where the instability and the insecurity and the uncertainty is so heavy on you that you're not sleeping well. You're gaining weight because of cortisol, or you're losing weight because you're not eating. You're not engaging in the activities that bring you joy and that make life worth living because you don't want to go certain places. Now with what's happening in the airports, for people who are big travelers, like I'm not anymore, but I used to be, people who like to travel a lot. Now you have to second guess, well, is it worth it travel? Your life starts to shrink and shrink and shrink, and your health starts to degrade lower and lower and lower. And then you start to take it out on your family, right? And then your work starts to suffer. Like, that's enough of a reason. That is enough of a reason. People move for much less than that, So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm so glad that you're out. I'm so glad you're out of that situation. Um, Talk to us a little bit, just a little bit about cost of living. Now, you were in New York City, so obviously that's like as bad as it can get, right? As high as it can get. But the cost of living in New York City versus where you are now, like, how is that comparing?
Yeah, I will say directly based on our record keeping, which isn't perfect. I try to do my best. For our specific situation, we've been able to decrease our cost by roughly a factor of two. So our rent is actually
I'm
cut
not a
in
math
half.
person. What does that mean?
Yeah. So our rent is actually cut in half and our food costs are cut in half. So
Wow.
now, yes, this is in reference to New York City and is in reference to our specific experience. I think it needs to be said. It's my wife, it's me, it's a cat who's getting into her older years, no children.
Right.
Okay. So no need to find schools or anything like that. So that
Mm,
needs to be, um, it needs to be stated plainly that our situation is in a specific way. I will also add this, and I think this is important. One of the reasons why we're here, just to elaborate on the factors, is I'm a business owner. I'm growing a business, so my income isn't super great yet.
mhm,
Being a business owner also means, as a business owner in the United States context, I do not bring in healthcare, right? Unless I buy it on
mhm,
the open market. There's a cost of that. Now, when we were in New York City, my wife was working as a full time
mhm,
employee. We both had healthcare through her employer, which I believe
mhm.
was very good and it was relatively affordable in terms of the premiums that came from her paycheck. A
Right.
major motivator, and this I think, without again getting too much into our family business, a major trigger for us to move was the decision for her case to study for a healthcare career. She was already a medical assistant. She wants to study for nursing and to work at that level and to do it in New York City and then
Mhm,
come home, be a full-time student. Some people can do
mhm.
that. It's not for everybody. So if we're going to
Especially
give
not in
ourselves
your
this,
older years.
yeah,
Like, I did that in my 20s. I worked full time and went to law school in my 20s, and I could not do it in my 30s, you know?
yeah.
And I certainly couldn't do it now. Yeah.
So I think the word that I might use, if one were to ask me, if there is one word to encapsulate our experience, our immigration experience,
Mhm.
specifically our experience of being here now, it's the word spaciousness. It's
Mm.
spaciousness regarding safety, the psychological safety that allows us to release certain concerns so we have more spaciousness in our minds. It's, yeah, the physical spaciousness. This is a bigger place for less money. The neighborhood's more spacious. It's a little spread out, but it's still walkable and there's still public transit, which is a great thing. It's the spaciousness also to focus on the things we want to, right? So for me, growing a business and not having to worry about healthcare, and I'm sure healthcare could be a whole conversation in and of itself if you wish to get
Mhm.
into that a little bit. And then for my wife, the spaciousness to be here and study and not have to hustle for a paycheck. So I think
Yeah.
the word spaciousness is great to encapsulate our experience. And the reason why I'm raising this up is because another factor is this. If we were to, if she were to go to nursing school in Romania,
Mm,
it would be the equivalent of maybe $5,000
mhm.
for the entire 3-year nursing program
Wow.
versus maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, $50,000 a year in the US.
Here, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
So
she would be acquiring a huge saddle of debt, which
correct.
defeats the whole purpose of increasing your earning potential.
Sure. And so
Yeah.
so these are some things that are on active research by us right now in terms of what would be the cost benefit of studying here versus going back to the USA and studying, or maybe
Mhm.
going to the United Kingdom, or maybe going to the European Union. So things
Mm,
like how do those particular places of study imply certain costs, but also certain benefits. So, specifically, if you go to study this discipline in a certain location, then how transferable is that nursing degree, that nursing certification to other places? So, this is
right.
still an active research by us, but I
Gotcha.
think it's worth mentioning because, yeah, if we were to go to school here, there would be it's like 10% the cost as it would
Yeah.
be in the USA. And that's
Yeah.
also a factor.
It's insane. I love the idea of spaciousness. When you said that, I actually felt like how the breath in my chest has more space living in Mexico. We live in Mexico. We live on a tropical island. We're like our situation is completely different, in that sense. And we live in a rural area where we lose power for days. There are lots of inconveniences, but it's the spaciousness that you speak of is something that I feel in my life in a way that I never did in the United States. Never. And I've told my husband, you know, I don't want to die, but if I died tomorrow, at least I had these couple years here with you in this life, because this is the life that it's the only version of my life that's really felt complete, and that where I've really felt that sense of calm, and also a sense of fulfillment, such that I don't chase things the way I used to chase things. Isn't that, I mean, it's like I think the mental change and the psychological change and the emotional change and the fulfillment that I experience here makes it such that I don't shop. Like, I don't shop the way I used to. I don't I engage a lot online because I have to earn a living, but I would probably be completely off of social media if I didn't have to, right? Lisa's asking, where do we live? We live in Cozumel, Mexico. Um and yeah, I don't drink as much as I used to. Like, I like alcohol. I like rum. I'm a rum fan, but I don't drink as much as I used to. I don't eat as much as I used to, like sugary stuff, like all those things that I used to reach for to fill some kind of void, or to tamp down anxiety, or to, feel like I matter. You know what I mean? Like all those things that we do to feed our egos and all of that. I'm not going to say it's non-existent. I'm still human, right? But it's like, it's just not it's not as big of a part of my life. I'm like, I don't need to do all that. I am content to sit in my hammock chair and watch the birds. you
Yeah,
know,
and this is about our health.
it
And to be
is.
very direct about it, it is we exist in bodies, right? Bodies have these somatic experiences, these emotional experiences, and
Mhm.
those are very valid. And they have a direct impact on the way we live, especially if we're talking about things like anxiety around safety,
Yep.
um, things like anxiety around can we still be employed tomorrow if we take a day off today because we have to go to a doctor appointment. These kinds of things have
Yep.
direct impacts on our health, direct, indirect, and that's very real, I think.
Yeah. That's a really good segue to your career transition. And I'll just add to that that I know my last full-time employment position, which I was making, comfortable six figures, great health insurance, retirement contribution. I bought a nice house, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? I am convinced it has shaved years off of my life that I hope I can get back. You know what I mean? Like literally, I got gray hair from that job. Literally, I developed gastritis and esophagus problems from, having um, acid reflux, and part of that was just the demands of the job. Like I was forced and not forced, but I had to. Part of the job was going to late dinners, right? Late dinners with these stakeholders and, you force fed, literally like force fed a bunch of heavy food at 7, 8 p.m. And then, well, you got to have a scotch and you got, if you don't drink, then, what's wrong with you? And going to bed, trying to put myself to sleep at 11 p.m. I'm 46. Okay. I had that job when I was like late 30s, early 40s. Well, actually, no, I got laid off right after I turned 40, but late 30s still, that's not a healthy way to live. I mean, some people can do it, but being in this situation where you're you're expected to operate on a lack of sleep, you're expected to eat um, more than you need to eat because it's social. You're expected to drink alcohol because it's social, and that's how you get the people to do what they need to do. And I was doing policy advocacy work, lobbying essentially, and all of that was so detrimental. Like it was so detrimental, and um, I justified it. Everybody that I worked with justified it. It was taken as the normal way of being, and the more you could deny yourself your physical needs, the more you could show up and perform and be on, the more you were praised. And at the end of the day, the rock stars, right, were the people who would do all that and also toe the line for the donors, for, whatever. So it was super, super toxic. So I don't know if that mirrors, and I don't want you to disclose anything you're not supposed to disclose or anything like that, but talk to me about the transition from, that employee role and how you leveraged into what you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that experience. And there are a couple of things that come up that I could speak into. But I think what comes immediately to my mind, something I said in a newsletter the other day, that it's actually very easy to be successful using today's metrics of success. All you have to do is do what the people in power, do what the people in power want you to do, when they want you to do it, how they want you to do it, and do it with a smile. But
Mm-hmm.
I have talked to so many people, you included, who have tried to do that, who have believed at some point in their life that that was the right thing to do, the so-called right
Mm-hmm.
thing to do, until their bodies forced them to stop with
Mm-hmm.
with chronic pain, depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
all the things that you mentioned, the things that come up when we are living out of integrity with ourselves is how
Mhm.
one person put it to me. And I very much agree with that because sometimes this happens. We begin to see that something is wrong. We begin to
Mhm.
see we can't continue to do this, but we don't know why. We don't have verbiage. We don't have language to describe exactly specifically what is wrong, but we know something is amiss. And sometimes
Mhm.
when we don't have the language to describe it, that vacuum gives us room to gaslight ourselves,
Mm.
especially if we see that
Mhm.
people who are getting ahead, or in some real cases, people who are making enough money to pay their bills and take care of their family, are doing specific things and
Mhm.
doing those certain things better than we're able to do because our bodies won't let us do it.
Mhm. And then we internalize it like there's something wrong with us. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I would say, and maybe this is a little bit direct, I feel like your audience would understand it, but I think I'll just go with it. I've said to a couple of people this year in particular, that the system of white supremacy co-opts all of us into perpetuating itself.
Mm,
And that includes describing, illustrating through people's lives the way that we're supposed to behave in order
mm,
to get our needs met. I mean, that's
yeah,
what it's about.
yeah,
Co-opting us into perpetuating the system in order to get our basic needs met. So I
yeah.
want to, and that's maybe a little bit academic, but I want to use that and try to answer your question succinctly because I was trained as an aeronautical engineer. I
Mm-hmm.
studied aeronautical engineering, and early in my university studies, I decided I did not want to build weapons systems.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Now, in the United States, the aeronautical engineering career, the career path is mostly oriented toward either operating weapon systems or building weapon systems as an engineer. So there are people in my university class who went to Northrop Grumman, they went to Raytheon, all
Mm-hmm.
those defense contractors that people have heard of, and they joined the military. One of our classmates was flying an F-15. One of them became a test pilot. One of them flew an F-22, Apache helicopters in Iraq and Afghanistan. And to be blunt about it, I am convinced that at least one of them is on duty over Iran right now. That's the career path, the most likely career path that's available
Mm.
to aeronautical engineers in the United States. And one of the job offers I had was from a company in Connecticut called Sikorsky Helicopter. I interviewed with them between.
I know, I know. My dad used to work for them.
So I was considering
Wow.
joining them, but I remember after the interview, I was thinking to myself, well, yes, Sikorsky has civilian helicopter programs, but they also have these military programs. And I don't want the situation where I end up on a military helicopter program. So I actually chose to go to graduate school. And when I studied in graduate school, I did a combination of aeronautical engineering and environmental policy. So that opened a career in the world of environmental policy. I went to
Right.
work for the US Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, and I
Mm,
worked for an office that's basically in the environmental policy office for the agency. And
mm,
this
mm,
office establishes um, regulations and policies in environmental matters related to aviation domestically, and is also the office that represents the, as we called back then, the United States position at the
mm.
United Nations, because there's a body of the United Nations called the International Civil Aviation Organization, or
Okay.
ICAO, and
Mm-hmm.
their headquarters is based in Montreal. So I've been to Montreal a number of times, first as a graduate student, and then as a member of the FAA. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
long story short, I went to that office because I thought that was the place to be to
Mm,
make the aviation sector cleaner and quieter and so on and so forth. So I started as a specialty in air quality or air pollution project
mm,
management. I was a project manager, and I transitioned to doing aviation noise related work and
mm,
all manner of policy, rulemaking, community engagement, environmental
mhm,
analysis, environmental modeling, so on and so forth. And
mhm,
then for about 6 years, I worked at the FAA in that office, and then I moved to. Um, I went to consulting, and
mm,
in
mm,
the consulting company I was working for, most of our clients were either airports or airlines, and in some cases also the FAA. And long
mhm,
story short, I would say, though I went into that industry because I thought I was going to help clean up the sector, what I discovered is that my real function, and I'm sharing my own perspective here, I'm not speaking for anybody else in the sector. My real
mm,
function in the sector was to protect the growth of the sector using
mm,
environmentally related skill sets so that I could deflect criticism of the sector on environmental grounds. And there are many ways in which my function was expressed that we don't have time to get into today.
yeah.
But I think the way I would summarize it, especially in the way that might be relevant to your experience, is that I felt I was being paid money, with good
Mhm,
healthcare to
mhm,
hurt the people that I wanted to help.
mm. Yeah.
People lower income people who lived in the domain of airports, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
who were affected by air pollution, people with higher rates of asthma, of chronic
Mm-hmm.
illness, um, who already were in those types of conditions,
Yeah,
even
environmental
outside of
racism
yes,
neighborhoods. I won't call it environmental justice because it's not
sure.
justice. Environmental racism neighborhoods. Yeah. Mhm.
And I could, and again, maybe a story for another time. I think through that, using the lens I have now, the more power oriented lens, I could I could do these types of power related critiques of the environmental policies and the environmental documents and the environmental regulations that I helped to
Mhm.
create while I was in
Mm.
that sector.
Mhm.
But I think at the time where I said, I think maybe this is not the sector for me, I didn't have that type of power related analysis. I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have that vocabulary. I actually got that later from people who were not in the aviation sector. All that I
Mhm.
knew back then is that I don't think this is for me. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel right. I'm not able to sleep.
Mhm.
I'm not able to get out of bed. I'm not able to do my best work. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
best work in the
misaligned.
system that maybe I was critiquing, but just the ability to I knew that I wasn't operating at my best.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a moral it's like it sounds like what they call moral injury, right? Like working in something where you're doing it to meet your own needs. You entered it for a purpose, and you're actually being forced to work against the same purpose that you entered it for. And similarly with a lot of large environmental NGOs, unfortunately, it is very similar. You end up really being in my case, wanting to protect the environment, right, itself, like the actual wildlife. I was in fisheries and wanting to I mean, I'm a snorkeler and scuba diver, right? So, like, fish are my friends, you know? And wanting to, protect the ecosystem, protect the wildlife, wanting the distribution of benefits from these industries to be equitable and fair, which they are absolutely not, and then finding that my work is actually there to support the industry itself, right? Because we're so dependent on, the stakeholders and blah, blah, the whole deal, right? So tell me, so that's the backstory is very interesting and very relatable. Tell us what you're doing now and how, if you can, if it's true, you kind of got at it earlier, is the emigration tide. I mean, you kinda got at it earlier, right? The emigrating to a place with a lower cost of living and more support is enabling you to actually build this business that is aligned with your ethics and your values. But talk a little bit about what that business is.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I want to weave in a couple of things that we've been talking about. I want to weave them together if I can do it succinctly, because I think it's worth saying I don't think I would be able to be employed in that same sector if I were still in that sector. I don't think I would have been able to keep my employment in that sector and live in Romania. That kind of
Mhm,
work that I was doing, especially when I was at the FAA, it was very Washington, D.C. focused. So I actually was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. FAA headquarters is just across the street from the National Mall, which is down the street from the Capitol. So it was a very DC oriented type of function. When
mhm,
I joined Airport Consulting, the way that that particular company was set up was such that their airports consulting practice actually did work in different parts of the country. They had a
mhm,
presence in Southeast Florida, or the Southeast
mhm,
region, mostly Florida, for instance, Tampa area. I was up in New York City at the time,
mhm,
and they had a big California presence, Pacific Northwest, so on and so forth. But still, because that sector was so federally regulated, very heavily federally regulated, there was still a center of gravity that was somewhat DC oriented, and other maybe smaller centers of gravity that were oriented around the major airports in the United States of America. So Fort Lauderdale, John F.
Mhm.
Kennedy and LaGuardia, New York, San
Mhm.
Francisco. There was a big San Francisco set of work that we were working on, Seattle, so on and so forth. So there were certain very regional aspects of that work that maybe I could have done from here, but I think just the client coordination, just being in similar time zones.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, oh, we haven't even talked about the conferences and what went on at the conferences, right?
Facts and
So,
yes.
obviously, that's in-person type stuff that would be
Yeah.
very difficult to do from here. So, I'll just offer that because I think it's relevant in the context of immigration to
Definitely.
consider the nature of our work in what ways it actually lends itself to a digital environment or to an environment that maybe could be found in the place that we're moving to. So in my
Mhm.
case, I currently have my own business. It's just me,
Mhm.
myself, and I. And
Mhm.
my tagline is providing marketing services to post capitalist businesses. Now,
Mm.
that is a tagline. It's intentionally maybe a little bit jargon heavy and something optimized to show on a one line in a LinkedIn post, but I'll just
Mhm.
deconstruct it a little bit for your audience and see if I can extract the elements that are relevant to immigration. So, my business is almost entirely online. And my clients are in different parts of the world. I have a couple USA based clients right now. I had a client last year for a short engagement that's based in Berlin, in Germany. I have a client
Mhm.
in France right
Mm.
now, and I would say the center of gravity of my professional network is much more Europe oriented now than it was even last year. But
That's
the
great.
nature of my work permits that, and of course, being in Romania, I'm closer in time zone to folks in Europe than in the states.
Yeah.
It's becoming increasingly hard to coordinate with folks in the states. It's doable, but
Mhm.
from I think currently I'm 9 hours ahead of people on the West Coast of the USA. At the end of the month, because our daylight time starts differently than in the United States, at the end of the
Mhm.
month, we'll go to 10 hours ahead of people in the
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest and California in the US. So that is a factor. It reduces options for
Sure.
doing business with folks back in the USA. Because of my work, and I'll just say most of my clients, nearly all of my clients are freelancers and
Mhm.
business owners. And I would
Mhm.
just say, in the context of this conversation, um, not breathing too much into the post capitalist jargon, but
Mm.
instead saying, I've been able to become closer in proximity to people who are more values aligned with me
Mm.
than in my prior career, right? I don't
Yeah.
have to explain things to these people like capitalism is a problem, colonialism is real and still exists,
Yeah.
issues of race, gender, patriarchy, so on and so forth. I don't have to explain this to the people that I meet, and they don't have to explain it to me, right? Because
Mhm.
of the way I position myself, the way I speak, and I will say most of my communication is on LinkedIn. Nearly all
Mhm.
of my clients have come from LinkedIn. I used to have an aviation orientation to my business. I actually started my business in 2021 to sell aviation
Mm.
services. And long story short, no one was buying. They didn't want better community engagement
Yeah.
because they didn't have to have that.
Yeah.
Right. So no one
Yeah.
was buying what I was trying to
And they
offer. I
weren't
was talking about
values aligned,
authentic
right? It's
engagement
like
at the time. Correct.
that's the
Yeah.
they were either they got to check the box or they don't, and if they've checked the
Correct.
box, they don't want to do it anymore. So I love that you said that about your clients are values aligned. Like that's exactly kind of why I decided I was very, very careful about, deciding to help people emigrate. Like I was, I've written so much about, Trump and MAGA and racism and sexism. And, it's very clear who I'm interested in working with. So give me an example of like, the type your clients are values line, what type of businesses are they, what type of services are they providing?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll talk about
Or
my
like
current
who
clients.
should come to you
Yeah,
for marketing?
sure. Let me give examples with my current clients, and
Yeah.
then I'll answer that question, or maybe I'll do it the other way on. I will say the way I would summarize it, and I've summarized it with a couple of people just over the last week, is I'm here to people, help the people they care about and meet their needs. And yes, we're often talking financial needs, getting enough money to pay the bills, but not just financial needs, right? We've just had a huge conversation about those somatic, those physical needs that we have to be in integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have our work be in integrity with
Yeah.
our values, who we actually are as people. I would call that a need. So, um, my clients are of different sectors, and I'll list them in just a second. But I would say all of them really believe in a world that maximizes care rather than profit. And the word
Mm,
maximization, I think, is important. And yeah, it's utilitarian economic jargon, but I use it intentionally because it's not that. I mean, I myself am a for-profit business, and mostly I work with for-profit freelancers and business owners. It's not that
mhm,
profit doesn't matter. It's just that that is a vector that
mm.
helps us sustain ourselves so that we can care for people, right?
It's not the
And
purpose in and of itself.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And most of the people who I come in proximity to, they speak to me about trying to find clients.
Mhm,
So when I work with them, I tend to do it under the banner of marketing. But that
mhm,
can look in different ways. Sometimes it looks more like business coaching, right?
mhm,
Talking about who you are, what kind of work do you really want to do, what are the audiences that you're trying to get in touch with, and how do you talk to them? We can call that
mhm,
marketing. Sometimes it's literal copywriting. So I have a client that I'll mention here in a moment where I was writing emails, newsletters, and social media posts, like
mhm,
very literal, specific marketing copy. Um,
mhm,
I have a client in France. Their focus is gender inclusive language translation. So
mm,
Romance languages are very gendered, and so there are specific things that have to be done to talk about non-binary folks'
mhm,
experiences, for instance, in those gendered languages like French and Spanish, for instance.
mhm,
The
mhm,
client I was just mentioning, who I did copywriting for, their work is to help nonprofits improve their donor database management systems. So, very
mm,
specific work, but also mission oriented.
mhm,
I'm working with a client in the USA who does organizational leadership development, organizational change management. And
mhm,
the client I worked with in Germany last year for a brief engagement, they build software, DEI software that they sell to companies to help them take care of and understand better the experience of marginalized employees in their
that's
companies. So each
how
different sector, but I would say within the banner of care, within the banner of what would a world look like beyond extraction, beyond
mhm,
exploitation, beyond
mhm,
beyond oppression, and
mm,
do we want to put that world together? Do we want to participate in that world? And if so, what would we actually do to
yeah,
make that world real?
I love that. Remind me
Yes.
remind me, um, about the donor platform client. Just remind me, and I'm gonna send you something about that because,
Yeah.
yeah, there might be an opportunity for you. Or just remind me.
Sure. I will. I'll give
We'll talk
myself a
about it
note.
all. That is so great, and I just like I'm seeing that this. I want to be hopeful and I want to be optimistic. It doesn't come Optimism doesn't come natural to me, um, because of my life experience, but I do think I am encountering more and more people that recognize that living a life solely, solely with your whole entire purpose and aim, being just to generate more and more and more money for some shareholder or for yourself. I mean, and the idea that that in and of itself is a reason to live, right? Or a purpose. People are waking up and being like, no, it's really not. Even people that are poor, right? Like because that I don't remember who talked about this, but there's that uh the realization that if your baseline needs are met, right? Like happiness doesn't increase with money after a certain point, right? Like if you have what you need, then continuing to acquire more and more and more is not going to actually increase your happiness or your contentment. But if you don't have what you need, then it will, right? If you're cold, you're hungry, your basic needs are not met, then then, money makes a big difference in life. But even people who are not having everything that they need, even people that are that would be in a better position with more money, are still talking to me about how, you know, they don't want to live that way. They don't want to live in a context where the drive for profit and the drive for more is, the main focus of life. And I know, I think that that's most of us. I really do. I think that's most of us. And those who don't recognize that, I think it's because they're caught in the same thing that I was talking about earlier of chasing, right? That void that needs filling, whether it's recognition from our parents or our neighbors that we're successful, or, the new toys, or the net worth that we can look at and show other people, that they're suffering. People that don't recognize that, profit is not a reason to to live, right? And to do what you do. There's the people that don't recognize that are suffering. Like that's why they're chasing the way they're chasing. Even the predators, right? I don't have any compassion for them. Don't get it twisted. Like, the predators are predators and they deserve whatever comes to them. But it's all stemming from that void, that chase, right? And that chase and that void, that greed, that need is what underlies all of these systems, right? That's colonialism. I mean, come on. How much do you need for the queen?
Right.
How much like it's insane, right? And I see more and more people questioning that paradigm. And it gives me hope, it gives me hope that you have clients that are like, yeah, we want to work with somebody whose values aligned, and, keep that framework of integrity. That's like fabulous. I love hearing that. We are at an hour. Do you want to say anything else? Well, first of all, tell me where people can find you so I can drop it in the chat. I know you're
Sure.
on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to follow you, LinkedIn?
Well, I think I'll keep it simple for folks since we're on Substack. I do have a Substack page. People are certainly welcome
Yep.
to give me messages there. And in my list of links on my Substack page, there is my LinkedIn profile. I do have a bigger presence on LinkedIn. And for those who have LinkedIn accounts, they can reach out to me there. But certainly my Substack messages, I believe my permission settings allow Substack messages from everybody so they can reach me. They can reach me there.
Yeah, and if anything, you can message me as well, and I can connect you to Chris. Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, sharing your experience, your whole perspective. I've always admired your work. I've always felt like, you're somebody that's here to do good in the world, you know, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm gonna talk to you about some the donor thing, because there might be
Yeah.
another opportunity for you there. Does anybody have any last minute questions for Chris in the chat? We had one observation. I did want to say this. Patricia Scott said, "This is so refreshing to hear from Chris about the decompression and return of expansion, creativity, positivity in their lives." Yes, it's real. It's
Yeah.
real. People say like emigrating won't fix your problems. Blah, blah. Yeah, okay.
But
But it depends on your
sometimes when we
problem.
get spaciousness, we can
Yep,
work on those problems with more clarity, more quickly, more effectively,
more
and that
effective.
matters.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. Well, we'll wrap it there. I'll do a little, synopsis and send the recording around. And if you're not already a subscriber to Chris, go ahead and subscribe to the Conscientious Immigrant. And thank you for tuning in. And thank you, Chris, again. It was great talking to you, and we will talk soon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to all the audience for being here. Be well.
Thanks, folks. Bye bye. There we go.